Lexus of Lewistown, the Student Bookstore, W.R. Hickey Beer Distributor, Roofing King, Cat Up, Triangle Heating and Cooling, Happy Valley Sports and Entertainment Alliance, and by Celebrities at the Ramada. Now, the Penn State Football Tailgate Show on 99.5, 107.5 The Bus, Bigfoot Country Legends, and simulcast on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Now, here's Thomas Frank Carr and Landon Tengwall.
Welcome to a rainy Beaver Stadium for the home opener for the Penn State Nittany Lions of the 2024 season. Off to a hot start after a strong performance in West Virginia. I don't think we're going to have a rain delay, Landon Tengwall, but I would not put it out of the question. Welcome to the Penn State Tailgate Show, brought to you by the Blaze Alexander Family Dealership, simulcast on 99.5 The Bus, Bigfoot Legends, and, of course, on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Appreciate everyone being here with us, especially Landon Tengwall from Behind the Wall podcast. Landon, let's get into last week, as it is what it is today. I hate that phrase, but at the same time, a rainy non-conference home opener. So I think what would be best for what Penn State fans want to know is how their team did in the first week, and what are the things that you can look for that are sustainable for the season, and how those things are going to go today. So welcome to the show. What are your high-level thoughts about last week?
Yeah, so starting off, I think Drew Aller, his confidence. Andy Kotelnicki has instilled in him confidence that Drew Aller has never been able to tap into this point, and that is just through giving him easy throws, letting him connect with Trey Wallace early on, settling him down. So I think this is the first time he's had a coordinator that's helped him out. Now it feels like he has a wide receiver one that's helping him out. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because Keandre Lambert-Smith had a really good game against West Virginia last year. But, I mean, Trey Wallace looks like a wide receiver one. So now you got that. Now you got that complementing Tyler Warren, because it kind of felt like last year, for the most part, the only guy Drew Aller really trusted was Tyler Warren. Yeah. So having Trey Wallace now, the importance of that can't be overstated, in my opinion. The other side of it, I think we saw an offensive line that had some question marks. It was something that wasn't talked about that much. It felt like all offseason, and the season gets here, and we start hearing about Anthony Donka and Drew Shelton, and it's like, oh, yeah, Olu Fashion and Caden Wallace really are gone. They both did go in the draft. So,
hard to miss them.
Oh, yeah, that's a fair point, especially Olu. But, those guys going in there and 0 sacks, 222 yards rushing on the ground. Yeah. Not a great West Virginia defense, but doing that with 3 new starters and 2 of them being young offensive tackles with not a ton of experience really impressed me. And then I think we just saw more of the same from the defense. It's kind of Tom Allen picked up right where Manny Diaz left off, and that's kind of what we expected. I don't think there was a better replacement for Manny Diaz from a standpoint of who Tom Allen is and kind of what he represents. So Tom, I mean, he's someone that is, kind of wanted to step away from that head coaching role, still be in charge of a big unit and someone like the Penn State defense that is top 3, top 5 every year. But, it looked like more of the same. We got the playmakers. We got 6, 7 guys going to the NFL on defense this year.
Yeah, and it's that defense we'll get to in just a little bit. We're going to talk a little more about the offense here in this opening segment. And because I think that, as James Franklin talked about after the in his Monday press conference, where nobody's talking about the defense because everyone wants to talk about the offense. You said before the game when we were on the air, it's got to look different than it did with Mike Yurcich and with Kirk Shiraka. Before that, it's got to feel different. Did that offense feel different to you with Andy Kotelnicki calling the plays?
T-Frank, it looked mighty different, man. Yeah. I'll tell you. I mean, it started off with putting Venga Ioane out at slot wide receiver, 350-pound guard. And I do want a little note on that, that Cooper Cousins came in. That was Cooper Cousins' first snap of his career. So I just want to say that kind of means that Cooper Cousins, to me, if anybody goes down, left guard, center, right guard, I think Cooper Cousins is the 2 deep at all 3 of those positions. So I just want to put that out there first. But talking about his creativity, like I said, he put him in Venga Ioane, 350 pounds in the slot, brought him down, motioned him, cracked the D end. Yeah. Then the next play, the quad bunch at the top of the screen, motion Nick Singleton down across the formation into the flat, pulling the flat defender away. Easy completion to Trey Wallace. I kind of started to build that rapport for the game. And then next play, hit Trey Wallace for that around 50-yard touchdown that really got the day going. So I think it just looked, to start, it was a little sloppy, but to be expected with a new offense, new offensive coordinator, and a lot of young guys. But it got me excited just how different, unique it looked, and the guys looked excited. And you heard it after the game. Andrew Rappelier, a couple guys just saying how exciting, how inspiring it is. And when you play inspired through your offensive coordinator's play calling, you reach a new level of play.
Yeah, it's fun because we've talked about this all offseason. We've said, like, this is what it's going to look like. Here are the things to look for. And then you actually get to see it. And it's like, this is what we were talking about, the creativity of not just motioning players. Because I look back last year at some of the data when Andy Kotelnicki was coming into the building. And when you look at, like, some of the high-level numbers, yeah, Penn State motioned players last year, but it was different. This year you can see how it works within the offense. It has a purpose. There's intentionality that has layers to it, not just on the play you're watching, but on the plays that come after that as well. And I think that's where you're going to see even concepts that I know you broke down over on your YouTube channel. We broke down at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Those are coming back. You're going to see these things build on themselves throughout the season as opposed to, hey, here are the 15 plays we're running. Try and stop it.
Similar stuff in new formations. You know what I mean? Those same motions that we saw that really influenced the defense to act a certain way that Andy Kotelnicki just had. That's kind of his bread and butter, is putting the defense at a deficit. I say it all the time. So we're going to continue to see him to do that. I don't think that is something that's going to change at all. And it just helps out the offense. There were certain times where there was a 7-man box for the defense, meaning there were 7 defenders in the box. And through pre-snap motion, Andy Kotelnicki moved one defender out of the box. So it was 7 blockers on offense versus 6 blockers on offense versus 6 defenders. And so that's where you get the advantage.
On top of that, one of those defenders was a corner. So, like, you're moving a preferable defender into the formation multiple times throughout that. So, it was funny. You broke down that play. I broke it down, and we saw 2 different things. And I watched yours. I'm like, why didn't I see that? Why didn't I see that? So, yeah, it's cool because there's multiple levels to this stuff. We love breaking these plays down. We love looking at these concepts. And I think from the perspective of the quarterback, it gives you that feeling of there's some easy throws that you mentioned, and also then sets you up for when those throws are difficult. You do have to read the full field. You have to drop back, and you have to know the concept. It's not like you had to do it all game. You've had the opportunity to, as you said, get in rhythm, but also it just lowers the threshold for what the quarterback has to do in the offense. So I think as it evolves, this is going to be – it's always been a user-friendly offense for the quarterback, but I'm excited to see how they do that for the style of Drew Aller. One thing I do want to ask you about your opinion on the Bo Pribula package, because unlike last year, we saw it early, we saw it often, to the point that I think even Bo Pribula fans were like, there's a lot of this going on right now. So what did you think of that particular aspect with the offense?
No, I remember we talked about it pregame West Virginia last week, and we were kind of predicting how we saw Bo and how many snaps he would see throughout the year. I think we said a little over 10%. I think he said close to 12, 15% last year, and it seems like it's going to be upwards of 20% from what we saw. I mean, including obviously games where he's going to play quarter, but he's going to play a couple quarters today, I'm sure. But he is someone that is going to be heavily involved in this new Andy Kotelnicki offense because he's a gadget tool. And Andy Kotelnicki, he loves a gadget tool. He truly is a Swiss Army knife. So I think there's a lot of cool things they're going to do. And quoting Amari Evans, I believe it was on Wednesday, was talking to Audrey Snyder. He said, "We haven't even gotten to the good plays yet."
I love that. That's honestly, when I was watching the game live, I'm like, there's not as much as I expected. I really feel like when you look at that game against West Virginia, from the rotation, you didn't see Nolan Rucci much until the game was out of hand. You didn't see some of the other players come into the game until maybe the third quarter. I think even J.B. Nelson wasn't in a whole lot. This is just on offense. So it felt like the rotations were pretty tight on the road. And I'm not saying – because this is the thing. It's like they're not hiding anything in the game plan, but they apparently didn't need a whole lot to get across the line with that West Virginia defense and the way they played.
Yeah, I mean, I think going into it, I knew Andy Kotelnicki's played West Virginia multiple times. I think he knew that wasn't a defense where he had to pull out everything, all the tricks out of his bag. I mean, there's definitely going to be some bigger tests, and probably USC defense being that next big test that we're going to face, where I don't think you'll see – I mean, Andy Kotelnicki, you're going to see new stuff every week. Like you said, I don't think – he's not someone that wants to hide it. He wants to kind of show off, his ability to play call and how he can really transform an offense to what we've seen. And you were talking about the motions. We still motioned last year, but it wasn't purposeful.
Yeah.
There was no method behind it as to why we were motioning, just kind of doing it.
Or there was just one idea, right? So it's like we want to motion into a stack, which means two receivers tight together so that we can get some sort of like man coverage beater instead of like we're motioning into this because we motion into this on every single play, and we're trying to leverage the defense in one or two other ways that complement plays we did previously. Like it is all interconnected, and I'm not trying to make him sound like some sort of genius, but like that is the idea of building and sequencing plays that he's talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. No. So I'm excited to see what Andy Kotonicki's going to bring out today, and I think we're going to get to. I mean, we'll get into this, but we're going to see a lot of young guys, and I'm excited to see because I mean they are the future. We are a team that is we're kind of young this year, but at the same time we're going to graduate a lot of guys. So this is kind of our first look at some of these cats that are going to be really impactful starting week 1 next year.
So there's a couple of things that we have to talk about, of course. Patrick here on the YouTube channel says, loved how confident Aller looked, even screaming about the West Virginia clapping. Can't see that happening last year. Hope it keeps up. Yeah, Drew Aller's confidence, I know we touch on this to start, but the decision-making that he had in that game, even in the second half when West Virginia, during a 2-hour rain delay, was able to basically change their defensive game plan. I wrote about this week at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. If you're listening here on the show, either on the radio or anywhere else in the world on the internet, you can subscribe to Blue White Illustrated, code PSU1, 2 months for $1 if you want to read all that stuff. But basically, their defense completely changed from one half to the other, causing the offense to not have as many open looks. Essentially, they calmed the secondary down, and they changed a couple things up so that the deep passing game didn't shred them. So there's two things on that, Landon. One, the quarterback struck fear into the defense enough that they played that coverage that allowed Nick Singleton to go crazy in the second half. His ability to make those decisions, Drew Aller, and then his ability to run in the second half, do you think that is something we'll see that sustains throughout the year?
I mean, I definitely think so, and I think there's a couple things that is dependent on, and that's the offensive line. I mean, like I said, the West Virginia defensive line in front seven really wasn't that big of a test. I mean, I want to give them their props for coming in week 1 with three new starters, but that wasn't that big of a test for them. So I think the biggest constant, and you just kind of put them separate, but putting them together, if we can consistently run the ball, and that's something that defenses fear, and a confident Drew Aller, and that doesn't mean that Drew Aller needs to throw for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns every game. It can be, low 200s with a couple of touchdowns. If we are running the ball consistently with Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton, and we're able to get 4, 5, 6 yards a pop, and then break off those 40, 50-yard runs with Nick Singleton, I think we're living in a great world where we're in a balanced offense. Penn State naturally is a pretty running offense. We probably lean closer to 60-40 than other teams in the Big Ten. So I'm just, I'm definitely curious to see how Andy Kotonicki is going to keep this going. But it basically sounds like we have not seen even the tip of the iceberg when it comes to his offensive play calling abilities.
So one of the things last week, and this comes from let me back up a second. One of the things that we've lost, I think, in the last generation is that there used to be call-in shows on the radio, Landon. You used to be able to call in and talk to us on the radio. Don't use that ability as much anymore. But what we do have on the YouTube channel is the ability to talk to people. Stephen Light, he says, football is back. Thanks for the coverage. Always appreciate you here, Stephen, on the show. But one of our regulars, somebody that I know you're very familiar with, Chuck Losey's mustache, shows up in the comments section. Something that I know has been in your face at least once in your life. He asked the question, are we going to see Julian Fleming and Liam Clifford catch some footballs today? What do you think?
I think so. I mean, Drew Aller, as much as you try to stay out of the media, obviously he's heard that all week. And, and the guys, they're going to say something, get me involved, that type of thing. And they're not going to press it. But I think there's going to be an emphasis to want to get other guys outside of Trey Wallace involved. Just because, as much as you have a number 1 wide receiver, and that is very nice. We haven't had a true number 1 wide receiver really since Jahan Dotson. And now Drew Aller has someone that he can trust, but we can't just rely on that. There has to be a number 2 that has to emerge.
Right.
These type of games, Bowling Green, followed by Kent State in a couple of weeks, that's where you start to emerge those other guys, and you really find out who is your wide receiver 2 and 3. Because I feel like there's a ton of candidates to fill out those last kind of 3 wide receiver spots, and 4 or 5 guys fighting for it. So I'm excited to see who's going to kind of start to separate themselves, and that starts today.
I found It's always interesting when you're watching the game, and football, there's about 1,000 things you need to track on any play. So even if you have the ability to like rewind and all those things, you don't pick up on everything right away. But I noticed something last week, and I was like, that seems odd. I noticed Julian Fleming was in the slot quite a bit. Coming into this season, my whole thing was like, that's not really... He's an outside receiver. He's a guy who plays on the outside, who catches balls against corners and things like that, as opposed to being in the middle and having to have two-way separations and being able to run routes and agility and separation. All those things are not necessarily his game. And on all his passing plays, he was in the slot because both Liam Clifford and Caden Saunders were not healthy last week. So I think if Liam Clifford is playing, that means Julian Fleming's in a better situation to actually catch the football instead of running coverage off, which I know that both of us broke down this week on the internet. And his role last week, I think, was highly understated in terms of he was a primary decoy and doing a lot of the dirty work on offense to get guys like Trey and Amari open.
Yeah, and then that Tyler Warren touchdown Coach Franklin talked about, where he kind of ran a post route, cleared it out, and Tyler Warren was wide open kind of up the seam.
By the way.
Oh, it was a beautiful concept. It was a fake power, so they pulled the right guard. They brought Nick Singleton in motion on a jet motion across, and the linebackers just got pulled all the way into the line of scrimmage just because of Andy Kotonicki's pre-snap fakes and post-snap. And it was an easy touchdown to Tyler Warren for Bo Pabula. But, yeah, Julian Fleming, he was getting a ton of slack early in the week, especially before Coach Franklin addressed it and kind of calmed everybody down, saying, hey, Julian played great.
Yeah.
He played, and people didn't realize. They were like, where was he? He played the same amount of snaps as Trey, which was tied for the most for the wide receivers.
Yeah.
So he was out there.
Yeah.
And, honestly, that's a good thing. If you notice him not getting the ball, blocking his butt off, running decoy routes, and then next thing you know, he's not making a fuss about it like most wide receivers would nowadays.
Right.
That means a lot. That means that they have a mature leader in Julian Fleming in that wide receiver group. So I honestly kind of like to see how Julian Fleming responded to that. I think we've had a couple answers just through West Virginia of how resilient this team is, how good the leadership is.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen some really positive signs up to this point. Now, there needs to be some more tests, but coming out early with that fumble, the halftime 2-hour delay, a couple other things, and you're responding pretty well to some adversity. So I like to see that from a Penn State roster. Well, I think there might have been some questions about the leadership and who was going to be the leaders and captains and that type of thing. And up to this point, I've been impressed by it.
It's something that we're going to watch today from an offensive perspective to see just like how this is a vibe check game in a lot of ways of how everything is running. But again, we started this whole first 20 minutes of the show talking about the offense, and the defense allowed essentially 2 completions that were against them last week in man coverage. So we're going to talk about the defense coming up next here on the Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships Tailgate Show 2024. But right now, we're getting to the Penn State practice update from this week, brought to you by me here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. The Penn State offense was missing several key pieces of the puzzle in the team's first game against West Virginia last week. While some of those players still participated in the game, the receiving room and tight ends were decidedly thin on offense. I'm Thomas Frank Carr from Blue White Illustrated, and this is your Penn State practice update. Today we're looking at the team's offensive skill position depth heading into the game against Bowling Green. The big news this week was that starting tight end Khalil Dinkins was back at practice on Wednesday. So, does that mean he's back in the lineup? Head coach James Franklin says it's not just about availability, it's also about ability.
There's still the issue, he's missed a ton of time, both mentally and physically. So we gotta knock the rust off, and we'll see if he's ready. Then, as you guys have seen, he can be a weapon for us. But if he's not physically ready or mentally ready, then we feel like we got some guys, like you've seen with Luke and others, Joey and some other guys that we think, can fill that role. Ideally, we'd love to have him back. So specifically with Luke, we can save some of those games. But we're going to do what we got to do, this week to play well.
It's also important to point out that backup tight end Jerry Cross practiced last week and then didn't play in the game. Speaking of players who did exactly that, both Liam Clifford and Caden Saunders were back at practice on Wednesday. The duo participated last week, but neither made an impact on offense. Saunders didn't even take snaps, and Penn State head coach James Franklin hinted there were other issues with health in the group.
We weren't sure if he was going to be able to go, and the plan was as long as the doctors and trainers and Caden felt like he could go, we were only going to use him as the punt returner in the game. But we're hoping that we'll have him back, as not just a return man, but also as a receiver this week as well. And then I think your question about the other wide receivers, again, I thought the group played well. We had some other bumps and bruises as well that I think we're through now.
The result was that the team played Julian Fleming in the slot for most of the passing snaps on Saturday. While that's not his natural position, he took one for the team to field a functional 3-receiver lineup with top target Trey Wallace and speedster Amari Evans. Franklin's comments on Monday suggest that one or both of the team's slot receivers are healthy enough to participate meaningfully in this game today. Clifford played only 3 snaps on receiving plays last week, but at least saw 21 offensive plays overall. Blue White Illustrated will provide you with status updates on the message board during the pregame process to let subscribers know who is participating, who is out, and who looks questionable during warm-ups. Subscribe right now with promo code PSU1 to get that info for just $1 for the next 2 months. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Those are your Penn State practice updates on the Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships Tailgate Show 2024. Alexander Family Dealerships. I haven't seen a single second of defensive practice. So what's going on over there?
Oh, just all the fun stuff. You're missing it all. We did get some one-on-ones at the end yesterday, which were pretty entertaining between the offensive and defensive line. For the most part, our viewing windows are short and they are consistent. It's the same basic drills. I will say Finn at linebacker is still a theme here. Tamir Robinson got hurt in the West Virginia game. We did not see him on Wednesday night at practice. That's an interesting one. Maybe bumps up an Anthony Specca to get some time this weekend. I think one of the subplots this weekend, and you never take an opponent lightly, but you think about Khalil Dinkins, you think about Caden Saunders, you think about Tamir Robinson, these guys, where maybe an extra week gets you to the bye, which gives you an extra week on top of that to get healthy. So I'm very curious how the medical staff is handling things with those guys, because, as we saw last week, Caden was out there. He played, Liam Clifford also, he had 21 snaps last week. So, obviously limited to what the expectations were. So get these guys back on track, get these guys healthy. No severity on the Robinson injury. We saw him in the tunnel after the game on Saturday. He looked okay. There's nothing noticeable that really jumped out, but definitely at linebacker, that's one we continue to watch. I hesitate to say it's going to be a make or break type thing, but because you're only playing 2 linebackers for the most part, but that gets pretty thin pretty quick. Kobe King and Tony Rojas are your frontline starters. Tyler Elsdon, DeLuca, Robinson was in there. Anthony Speck as well. So it's not the deepest spot on the team. So that's pretty much what we're watching on the defensive side. Some defensive line drills and things like that. Just kind of I don't want to say going through the motions, but going through the same motions that we see every week, which is intense. Don't get me wrong. But it's still a lot of that. Ty Blanding out there with the travel squad. Did not see Xavier Gilliam there as we did last week. Max Granville with the traveling squad, and capped it off by Abdul Carter and Anthony Dunk. I think that's becoming the new Chop versus Olu, in one-on-ones, because that was quite entertaining.
Yeah, and so you can go check out Fitz's notes, or Nate's, I think Nate wrote the notes yesterday for the defense. You both were over there and contributed to the conversation.
Wrote the notes, but he got the name on it. Actually, Greg got the name on it, and then we switched it. Just Greg's very greedy. So, but no, Nate was over there watching as well, and he kind of saw the same things. And yeah, it's just I think for the most part, from top to bottom, that defense, you feel pretty good. But you look a little bit closer on depth, it's certainly going to be worth watching.
The linebackers, my analysis coming out of the last game was I don't know that they played particularly well. And then you got some depth issues there. That is something that I think, I don't know if this game or whenever, they have plenty of time to recover from that. And the defense typically, I want to say, starts slow traditionally from a run defense perspective, where they're not bad, but they're not the best they're going to be. As the season wore on, the last 2 seasons under Manny D.
Smartest person at your tailgate. Get the expert's view of today's game. Here's Landon Tengwall as he gives you the key matchups. Brought to you by Stalker Chevrolet. For your next vehicle purchase, come to Stalker Chevrolet and save with low interest rates. And remember, only at Stalker Chevrolet will you get the Stalker Advantage with the purchase of any new vehicle.
All right, here we go. You're up. You're up. Go ahead.
Welcome back to the Penn State Football Tailgate Show. We are here with Landon Tengwall's key matchup. Landon, your key matchup for the game is?
Yeah, so my key matchup for the game is the Penn State wide receivers versus the Bowling Green defensive backs. And the reason why I went with that is because we're going to win the game. But I think the biggest thing we want to come away from this game saying is that our wide receivers, we have other serviceable wide receivers outside of Trey Wallace. I think that's the biggest thing we can come away with. Because if we dominate up front in the run game, yeah, that's how it works. The MAC they're not as good. When you're a lower level college, that's normally where you get beat is the trenches because you're not able to recruit as high caliber guys. Now the skill position, there is not as much change but between lower level and higher level colleges. So that's why if I can see our wide receivers take advantage of some DBs that aren't really that good. I don't think it's that much of a difference from West Virginia's defensive backs to Bowling Greens. And if we can take advantage of that, and like I said, find a wide receiver too for Drew Aller and take a little bit of pressure off Trey Wallace, where it doesn't feel like every single game Trey Wallace has to come up with 120 yards and a couple of touchdowns. It can be Amari Evans one week. Next week, Liam Clifford can come 70, 80 yards. And I think we can do that, where it's kind of a wide receiver 2-3 by committee. I mean, we could see that type of style from Andy Kotelnicki because I don't know if we have a wide receiver that's going to solidify themselves. But if it is, today's the day to do it. So that is why the Penn State wide receivers versus the Bowling Green defensive backs is my key matchup of the day.
Where does tight end and Tyler Warren fit into the receiver conversation? Do you open that up to pass catcher, or do you think there has to be legitimate other balancing factor from the wide receiver core on the field?
Of course, I think Tyler Warren will probably be – I think he could be the number one wide receiver on this team. Well, the number one receiver on this team.
Right.
But I want another wide receiver. Tyler Warren does a lot of blocking. He's inside a lot. Like I said, I still think he will be Drew Aller's safety blanket. And when Drew Aller needs somewhere to go and he's a little unsure, it'll probably still be Tyler Warren. And it might be Trey Wallace after what we saw last week. But I just want that number two guy, or like I said, a couple guys to show up, and it's wide receiver 2-3 by committee where there's kind of a rotation. And I think someone that we could see today is Tyseer Denmark. That was a lot of the coaches are really high on him coming out of camp, and he kind of just has continued to really impress people. So fighting for that wide receiver 4, around that spot for it sounds like for Tyseer Denmark. So he's not going to be super impactful his freshman year, but there is definitely that possibility for him to start to make an impact on this offense and see anywhere from like 10 to 15 catches on the year.
With the receiver room, one of the things I found interesting, Landon, if you could expound upon this a little bit, is just the amount that you're playing those combination of players on the field, talking about this is going to be a run-heavy offense, and yet they still played 3 receivers last week primarily. What are the reasons for doing that, and how does that help if you have legitimately 3 pass catchers or 2 pass catchers out there that are a threat to the other team?
Yeah, I mean, it changes how the defense completely handles it. I mean, when you have a couple responsibilities that you have to watch. So, I mean, say, for example, Amari Evans is someone that can take the top off a defense. So if Amari Evans is someone now the defense has to worry about, and they're saying, hey, he might take us deep. We always have to watch him on this deep post. That starts to put a strain on the defense. And then it's Trey Wallace, and then it's Tyler Warren as well. And now you enter in Nick Singleton as a pass catcher, and it's like, okay, we have threats all over the field if we can get a wide receiver number 2. Take away if you don't have a true wide receiver number 2, it kind of falls off a little bit. But you start to talk about the passing threats, getting Nick Singleton involved, who I think can be top 3 in receiving once it's all said and done in this 2024 football season. Especially with Andy Kotelnicki and how creative he's getting. I think this passing attack could be something that we haven't really seen since Joe Moorhead left the building.
It's a fascinating situation where you're taking what felt like a weakness, and through the process of reaffirming some faith, it might end up being a strength, the versatility of the number of players that can catch the football in this offense. As long as you do, as you mentioned, find that other wide receiver to balance out formations, give you the ability to throw and run from any situation. Let's talk about the defense, because we talked a lot about the offense. Like I said, James Franklin talked about to start out his Monday press conference notes. Exactly a minute in, he talked for about 20 seconds and then said, hold on, we haven't talked enough about this defense. Obviously, everyone's excited about the offense, and it is the most different thing. You said it's kind of business as usual for the defense. What do you mean, and what did you see last week?
Yeah, what I meant by that was it's just defense taking care of business and getting stops when we need them. There was a couple times where we really depended on the defense starting off first with that fumbled snap by Nick Dawkins and Drew Aller. There was a clap by the West Virginia defender, but the refs didn't see it. So, hey, you come out, the defense comes out on the field, it's 0-0. Now West Virginia has the ball on our 30-yard line. Well, we get a little luck and fortune, but I think Garrett Green went to recover the ball. Abdul Carter trucked Garrett Green into the ground, kind of reforcing the fumble, and then got the turnover back, got the ball back for the offense. And so little things like that. There was a fourth down stop. There should have been 2 fourth down stops, but fourth down stop deep into our own territory by our defense, and then a couple turnovers. And that is what Penn State defense does. And I think, it was kind of wrong of me to say that the defense was just the same defense, because they do deserve a lot more credit. James Franklin is right. It's kind of accustomed to it now.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing that you held an insanely high standard from the year before.
Exactly, and I think that's a credit to Tom Allen, and like I said, how smooth that transition was, where Manny Diaz, and I'll just tell you guys from a player's perspective that was around him, he was the greatest coach I've ever been around. From a standpoint of how he could inspire men through his speech, through a standpoint of his coaching. It was obviously roommates with Dom DeLuca, who was his main coach, and he would jump off a cliff if Manny Diaz told him to do it. So coming in and Tom Allen replacing that so swiftly and so easily, I think it says a lot about where this defense is going to continue to go. And I'd be excited about the possibility of Tom Allen. I mean, he doesn't want to go head coach anymore.
Yeah.
Is this somewhere where Tom Allen could stay for a long time? I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I really don't think there could have been a better replacement for Manny Diaz.
Yeah, and it's a situation where you find a guy who, I think, that was another question a lot of people asked me this offseason was, what's Tom Allen's relationship with the defensive players like? And I think that question is more credit to Manny Diaz because of everything you just said of, like, this is a guy who is a difference maker in that situation. But it doesn't have to be the same. It can be different, but on a same level. And I think overall, the two men, their defenses, the way they lead, the way that they are on that side of the ball, they are the same but different in a lot of aspects. So I think Penn State, as you mentioned, found a really good fit there. I was super interested. I asked James Franklin about this before the season, talking about what you're looking for from the defense, bringing some of those intangibles from Indiana, some of the creativity, and then incorporating that into more talent. And then by the end of camp, he's just said, yeah, we're going to play more man coverage. So they go out in the first game, and they just dominate. Like, you watch that game, and if you haven't checked it out, check out both of our breakdowns of the game. There were no open wide receivers for West Virginia. So I think we haven't even seen the Tom Allen defense yet. I think we just saw what they needed to do in week 1 to shut down an attack that did not scare them.
Well, you saw a defense that was just flat out better than the West Virginia offense. I mean, we just had better players. They didn't have anybody on offense to combat KJ Winston, Jalen Reed, Deni Dennis Sutton, Abdul Carter. It really wasn't there. So it was fun to watch, but you're right. I don't think Tom Allen had to get that creative just because his players were better than them. And Jalen Kimber, AJ Harris, I think what we saw from them was really exciting. But I do want to let's talk about this for a second, T. Frank, where Franklin came out in his press conference and basically said, don't be surprised if you see guys that started in week 1 not starting in week 2. And I don't know if that's kind of trying to get guys a little bit more burn, a little more confidence heading especially into the bye week.
Yeah.
But I thought that's interesting. And it mainly seemed like he was alluding to cornerback. I don't really know where else, unless you want to start Nolan Rucci over Donka. Outside of that, I don't really think that's happening. But it sounded like it was cornerback. So I don't know. Maybe we see Cam Miller, a couple other guys. Elliot Washington had a pick. And so he said pretty much at the end of camp that he feels like we got 5-6 guys that can start at the cornerback position. So definitely think he was referring to cornerback. So I would not be surprised if you see guys that started week 1 not in week 2. So something to keep an eye on for sure.
But they all played in that game, and I think that's the interesting thing, kind of like a defensive tackle and defensive end where you have a rotating depth of players that you feel confident in and that have, at least on different parts of the defense, talking about the defensive line, you have some proven ability there. When you look at those corners and it's the opposite of there's a lot to prove, and then they go out and prove it in week 1, and then you're just like, well, hold on, wait 1 second, you might see other guys also prove it later. That's a great place to be at one of the most important positions on the field. I don't think we make the joke on the BWI Live show that Sean Fitz is Terry Smith's agent because, like, anytime we talk about corner, it's like, hey, they got this corner. Hey, they got that corner. They've been successful in the transfer portal. They've been successful in recruiting. And they built this room that feels bulletproof right now. Obviously, it's not. No position in the country is that. But at the same time, you feel very good about a part of the defense that you thought could have been a weakness, but they turned that around in one offseason with some critical transfers. And I think that's just testament to the work of this team evolving over time, of embracing these different challenges like the portal and NIL and recruiting.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And they lost 3 starters from last year, and we saw that in the Peach Bowl against Ole Miss, pretty much going against the best passing attack in all of college football. And we put 2 freshmen out there at cornerback, and it wasn't really fair to Zion Tracy or Cam Miller. And I thought, honestly, they played a good game. They were in position a lot against those Ole Miss wide receivers, and they couldn't do anything. Jackson Dart was just putting it on the money.
Right.
But now you come in after losing your 3 starting cornerbacks, and you live in a world where you have depth. Not only guys that can play, but depth, T. Frank, at that position. That is a credit, like you said, to Terry Smith, James Franklin, and the entire defensive staff of just reloading that cornerback room. It really is. It's exciting to see, and a defense that we thought, might take a step back. Maybe they really don't.
Well, one of the things that they were able to do was control the line of scrimmage with the defensive line, even though I thought the West Virginia scheme is good. The football players up front were good. They definitely took a step back, like we talked about before the show, from last year. But at the same time, Penn State did not take a step back after losing a lot of those defensive linemen. One player, obviously, that has everyone's attention is Abdul Carter. You and I were both on the fence of, hey, let's let him play a game, see what he actually is, and then we can talk about the hype being real or not real with Abdul Carter. So we're one game through that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there were plays where Abdul was very disruptive, and that he was mighty close to getting home. So, and he was going against Wyatt Mullum, who's a first, second-round guy, and then I believe he got injured halfway through the game. But I like what I saw from Abdul. I think he can still continue to craft his hands and continue to get better with that and be a little bit more of a defined pass rusher. But at the same time, he is someone who is the most athletic guy on the field every time he steps on the field. He has the best burst. He is, has the best bend, all of that. So, I think when you go against a lesser team like Bowling Green, there's an opportunity there for Abdul to get home on some sacks. Like think Adisa Isaac last year against UMass. That right tackle against UMass probably shouldn't have been playing college football at that point, and he let up 2.5 sacks just to Adisa Isaac alone.
Yeah.
So, these are the games where I think Abdul Carter can get going. And they don't mean that much. A lot of coaches are quoted saying, hey, we don't really care that much about sacks. It's about those pressures and that kind of consistent production by my DNs. But it does something for the confidence when Abdul Carter and Dennis Sutton start to rack up some sacks.
Well,
and today is the day.
It's the psyche of the box score. As much as everyone there's 2 camps, people who only look at the box score and then people who say the box score is useless and like it doesn't tell much of a story because of pressures, because of the play level information of who set up the play for somebody else to go get a stat. There were a lot of plays I thought last week Abdul was setting up other players to go get stats. I was surprised from a run perspective that he was actually a much better player than I was anticipating. I kind of thought he might be like Chop Robinson in Chop's first year in 2022 when he kind of was the third down specialist. He came in after Nick Tarburton and rushed the passer, but Abdul started, and he was a well-rounded player at 260 with his length, his burst. He had that potential this whole offseason. One game against one good offensive tackle, and then maybe not as good of a one in the second half. It'll be interesting to see his development throughout the season, but I thought for a player who everyone had massive hype for, and then I think the box score didn't really give them the love they deserved, I'm now on the other side of this where I was like, whoa. Everyone calm down. Abdul Carter needs to play the position first. Now I'm like, hey, guys, did you know how good Abdul Carter was? Did you see that?
And he was playing, he went against Egan Boyer in the spring game, and he was someone, a 260-pound young freshman tackle. Yeah. So that's why he, had 2 sacks. And I said, all right, pump the brakes. He knows the snap count, all of that. So I was right there with you, T. Frank. But I think what we saw from Abdul Carter, like you said, getting pressure and forcing Garrett Green to be uncomfortable, forcing him into other Penn State rushers is what he did. And I'm sure, he graded out pretty well in that West Virginia game. So I think, like I said, now against these lesser tackles that are a lot more unathletic, And that's where the difference is, like I said earlier, in these MAC to Big Ten schools. It's not as big of a difference in the skill position, but it is more up front.
Of course it is, former offensive lineman Landon Tengwall.
Always talk about the O-line team.
Of course it is. It's always in the trenches for Landon. That's where there aren't enough Landon Tengwalls on the other side. We are international here on the BWI Live Show. I love these games because we get a bunch of people in from Amsterdam, says Robert Bosfield. All-around game from the offense based on the Bowling Green defense from last week. I'm curious how South Bowling Green's O-line against the Penn State defensive line. We're going to be getting to that in the final segment, talking about Bowling Green a little bit. I think Penn State can do whatever they want on both sides of the ball from a schematic perspective and from a talent perspective. Of course, Knight Raven, who is our UK correspondent, he is checking in from Brussels. So the BWI Live and Penn State Football Tailgate Show brought to you by Bigfoot Country Legends and 99.5 The Bus locally. Check us out, 103.7, 104.3, and 99.5 if you're here tailgating. We're going to come back in just a moment. More conversation about the young players that are likely going to play in this game. Again, this is always a disrespectful thing. We haven't talked about Bowling Green in the hour we've been on the air. We will eventually, but what we're going to focus on before then is we're going to look at the young players who might have an opportunity to play today. You get your first look at maybe a Quentin Martin. Somebody's already mentioned him in the chat. Talk about that after the Coach's Corner. We'll be right back.
Press conferences are boring, right?
That's why we've set aside the most important stuff for you.
It's Coach's Corner, powered by Your Cigar Den and Monte Cristo Lounge, with free, easy in and out parking for all your tailgating needs. Check out Your Cigar Den's new Casa Cuban Lounge on Colonnade Boulevard next to Wegmans.
James Franklin's favorite phrase, going 1-0, has come to pass. The Nittany Lions knocked off the West Virginia Mountaineers 1 week ago in convincing fashion. A 34-12 victory is just what the doctor ordered. Only if that doctor is named James and not Pat McAfee. There are lots of positives Coach Franklin took away from the game, but Penn State still has some work to do.
Turnover battle, you guys know we won. Explosive play battle, we won. Third down battle, we won. Sack battle, we won. We got to clean up, really drive start. And when I say clean up, drive start, I didn't feel like we kicked the ball as well as we're capable of kicking. That is kickoff, that is punts, that is field goals, really all three phases. And then penalties. We just gave too many yards away trying to be aggressive, and we got to eliminate those things.
The Nittany Lions racked up 8 penalties for 60 yards in the rainy affair down in West Virginia. Some of those penalties James alluded to came from star defensive end Abdul Carter. Many feel the Philly native had a subdued opening weekend, but Franklin feels pretty good about Carter in more ways than just his play on the field.
You guys know there's been a bunch of buzz about him for his ability on the field, but I'm also really proud of his growth off the field. We were able to have some conversations yesterday about the penalties and just the way he approached it, his maturity, his ability, to take some constructive criticism and be accountable for it was really, really impressive. So I'm proud of him. I think he's going to have a big year for us, and I think he's setting himself up for really bright things in his future as well.
The Penn State defense has been a major plus for Penn State in recent years, but in Morgantown, it was the offense that caught everyone's attention. New offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki showed up and showed off his schemes in Week 1. Penn State fans are feeling hopeful for the offensive strides this team can make this year, and so is James Franklin.
I think it was good. I think he did a really good job. When you're able to do the things that we were able to do in this game on offense, in terms of running the ball, in terms of throwing the ball, in terms of explosive plays, it's definitely something to build on. And then also the fact that we were able to create touchdowns and not turn the ball over. Your touchdown to interception ratio, that continues to be a strength of ours. Drew's done a really good job of that, last year and started out this year the right way from that standpoint.
Penn State has turned the calendar to September and prepared all week for their home opener against Bowling Green. Bowling Green took down Fordham in Week 1 in impressive fashion, winning 41-17. Coach Franklin is riding high from his squad's offensive display last weekend, but the Falcons' defense is one to watch out for.
They're a bigger, more physical team than what I anticipated. You look at them on film, but then also look at their numbers. They're a big physical group. This is a team that's going to play combination of odd and even front, primarily a middle of the field open defense, but they will close it up and play some zone cover 3. And a decent amount of pressure as well.
That's your Coach's Corner for this week. More from the Penn State Tailgate Show coming up.
Throughout the show, but the Renegade says, I know this is super early, but was Penn State's win more of a Penn State looked good or West Virginia wasn't as good as we thought? Nate, what is your thought on this question? And he threw in the kicker of, you got to pick one.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to your rules, the Renegade.
Of course.
I
think
the Renegade,
I think that
a Renegade. Sorry.
I think that pretty clearly it's both. And I hesitate on the Penn State is looking very good thing. I think that if we're being honest, certainly they didn't start great. Right. There was offensively, they didn't start great. Defensively, it was, how do you put it? Right. That if Neil Brown kicks field goals in certain spots, right? They got into the fringe red zone. Like West Virginia made it to the fringe red zone 4 times, 3 times. I don't know, 3 or 4 times. Yeah. So I think that, against better teams, certainly more efficient offensive teams, there will be opportunities there that West Virginia wasn't able to cash in on. And certainly I understand the argument of the officiating ultimately leading to points on the scoreboard for West Virginia. I'm just more along the lines of the opportunities were there. West Virginia just wasn't able to get it through. So
4 times.
Yeah, 4 times. So, is that end all be all? No. And it's not that bad of a thing, but I think it suggests a more vulnerable defensive position than what ultimately appeared on the scoreboard. And the same thing, right? So, was West Virginia bad? I don't think so. I don't think they're good. And I think Penn State is pretty good. I just think Penn State also has quite a lot of room to grow and reason to believe it can grow based on that performance.
Nailed the last part. Reason to believe that they can grow, because this is a starting point. This is not, this is not what you expect with the offense from here to game 12. It is a starting point. There's room to improve. You talk about Katron, you talk about those other receivers, maybe getting Tyler Warren more involved. Like there's room for improvement here. And what we saw from a play calling perspective, from a setting the table for the next play call perspective, Kotelnicki's got some stuff, man. He's got some. Yeah. He's got the ability to put some to string some things together. Fewer wasted possessions, fewer wasted plays than we had grown accustomed to be seeing. But I will say, yes, it is a starting point. It was week 1. It was probably a smoother week 1 than we expected. It was an opponent that wasn't as good as they were made out to be.
Yeah.
And that was
the Big 12 is not as good as the Big 10 or the SEC. There's just no way around that.
You look at
by Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships.
And you're up. Go ahead.
Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships celebrating more than 40 years of service to the community. Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships has a vehicle to fit your budget and transportation needs. Home of the $1,000 lowest price guarantee with 20 locations throughout Pennsylvania. We're going to be talking about the young players that we're interested in watching, and maybe you're interested in watching today against Bowling Green later, maybe later on in the game, maybe some guys early in the game. But I know one thing you wanted to talk about, Landon, here on the show was Saquon Barkley and his performance in his return to Pennsylvania. All the way in Brazil, in the NFL kickoff game last night. So I'll be up front. I did not see the game. What was your reaction to his performance?
My reaction was he's on an offense that is good. Yeah, that's the first thing. So he has an offensive line that actually blocks for him, a competent play caller, and then he has wide receivers and a quarterback that will make plays, and not all the pressure's on him. Now, T-Frank, I got to tell you. So what happened was on Twitter, Saquon's first play, he basically slipped in the backfield on his first run attempt, and he lost like 4 yards. Yeah. So very quickly they got to clowning him on Twitter, making fun of him. Right. Well, soon Saquon was laughing as he had 3 touchdowns, I think like 120, 130 all-purpose yards. and showed out in his debut. So it just makes me excited. I think everybody that loves Penn State and loves Saquon, just to see him somewhere where he can succeed now and he's having fun again. I mean, it was kind of demoralizing to watch him in New York. You just turn it on and you'd be like, man, that sucks. That was just kind of how it felt. And now it's like, I mean, first off, a lot of people that are Penn State fans are Eagles fans, so that's exciting. And then not me, but, hey, do your thing. And, Saquon had a fantastic night, so it was awesome to see.
So, like I said, I didn't see the game, but I'm just imagining that it worked. Their offense also worked a lot better because when they lost Miles Sanders in that offense, their read option game with Jalen Hurts is an equalizer for the passing game too, because that RPO and the threat of all those things all work together. So, did it look like the Eagles before the NFL figured them out?
It did. It looked like Miles, he was breaking off those runs, and not only so he had, I think he had like a 40-yard run that he bursted off, that he hit the hole, and he just got out. He barely got caught on the last defender. So, I mean, Saquon looked
Nick
explosive.
Singleton, it happens to everybody.
It's a good lesson to learn. But no, he looked explosive. One of his touchdown runs, I think it was like a 12-yard touchdown. But when he decided to hit the hole, they ran power. The hole was there. He hit it, and no one was stopping him. So to see an explosive Saquon again it's exciting.
So one of the things that we're looking for today here on the show is young players that we're interested in seeing. Offensively, defensively, where do you want to start when it comes to the things on the field today with those young players that are heading maybe into their first game at Beaver Stadium?
Yeah, the first guy I'm excited I want to talk about is Dejon Lane. And because he's kind of that fourth safety right now. He's played his way. He's a true freshman, and he's playing some. But he's someone I was in the barbershop a couple weeks ago before West Virginia, and I asked Jalen Reed, who he was a big fan of, and he said, man, this kid, Dejon Lane, is really coming on. He's impressing Dex, and he's impressing all the starters. And when you start impressing Kevin Winston Jr. and Jalen Reed and earning those guys respect, the two, I think, one of a couple of best safeties in all of college football, that says a lot about you. So it seems like not only we talked about us reloading at cornerback, T. Frank, it seems like we got guys to reload at safety as well after we have a couple really elite guys heading out after this year. So they're right there at the safety position. But the biggest one for me, and I'm always going to bring it back to offensive line, T. Frank, is Cooper Cousins. I can't wait to see Cooper Cousins play a lot of meaningful snaps. I was not able to get my hands on all the West Virginia tape, but I saw him mid-game pancake someone when he got in late. I mean, he's a mauler. I remember, for him to be playing as a true freshman means a lot, because I was a true freshman, and I thought I was pretty good. And Wisconsin 2021, my freshman, I was holding the clipboard the entire season up until pretty much Rutgers. I remember being at Ohio State.
Do you actually have a clipboard?
No, we had a clipboard, because back then, this is now now you are allowed to have mics in the helmets, and you are allowed to have the tablets on the sideline. Those tablets, you always see the Tom Brady spiking into the ground after he threw an interception. And so now it takes it away. But Coach Trout, he would have us write down the plays, so when the offense gets off the field, he can say, hey, on play 3, what happened? And they know, they can refer exactly what play it was. Hey, we ran, ISO right, and then we could talk about what happened. But I had to be the guy that wrote it down. And I remember we're at Ohio State 2021, and we almost won that game too.
Yeah.
But I had fans screaming at me. They were calling me clipboard boy and using another explicitive in there as well. I won't include on air. But, yeah, that was a little demoralizing. Similar how the guys walking past. You're lucky that I didn't get up and just go. Landon was about to catch maybe a charge out here in front of Beaver Stadium. But, anyways. So, yeah, it's getting back on the topic guys are excited about is Cooper Cousins. Just how much he played already in his first game as a freshman, I think says a lot about how Coach Troutwine and how Coach Franklin feel about this young offensive lineman.
So we had the conversation, I don't know if we played it here during one of the breaks on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, was the idea of getting the young but veteran players some time, because a lot of us immediately jump to the Max Granvilles and the true freshmen on the team, but a guy like Cam Wallace, and then you have Quentin Martin at that running back position. When it comes to these games, what do you think is more important, of getting guys a look or getting guys that you feel like Cam Wallace played in that West Virginia game, getting him as many reps as possible, and maybe even the same thing with a Bo Prabula at quarterback? Do you think those guys are going to get enough work in the first and second quarter, or is that going to be something that we see extended from them all the way into the third, if we don't see as many of those young guys as we're expecting?
Well, I think that's kind of the question of the day today for Penn State is, can we be done by halftime, pretty much? I mean, that's how it was as a player going to these games. I remember
So you think the same way that everybody else out here
It's
does.
everybody else. I'll throw him under the bus. He's in the NFL now. But I remember, like, Curtis Jacobs would always come around. He'd be like, yo, let's get out of here by halftime. Like, those lower-level, like, MAC teams, he was like, yo, let's get everybody off the field and get these young guys in going into the third quarter. So, I mean, that is success there. If you're heading into halftime, I'd say up 4 touchdowns around there, and you're able to kind of sit your guys the rest of the game, and then you can start to get a look at some of these younger cats. And like you said, I do want to see a ton of Cam Wallace. That's someone, when I'm talking to people in and around the facility, they are really impressed by him, and he's just kind of behind Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. So, it's hard to shine when you're behind 2 stars like that, but he's someone that can be the future at this running back position, where it is consistently just reloaded. So I'm excited to see him get some looks, as you mentioned. And then Bo Prabula, I think we're going to see early and often. I would say today, I'm going to make this prediction, this is one of the games that Bo will probably get the most snaps from in any game this season will be today. I think we're going to see a ton of him. I think we're going to try to run the ball and really establish the offensive line, the ground game, and like I said, get back to grinding away 12-play drives with 4, 5, 6 yards a pop on the ground game.
And I think that beyond Bo throwing the football, which I think everybody is interested in watching him do that, what he seemed to struggle with a little bit in that first game was after he fumbled, he seemed a little gun-shy about running up the middle on some of those quarterback options where he had for those that don't know, some of those play designs, he's the primary runner running between the tackles, not the running back. And he decided not to on one of those plays where he decided to cut back into your boy Anthony Dongo, just running the back of him. We all know Bo's a better runner than that. So just the process and the operating those plays and the functioning of the Bo Prabula package, I think is going to be something that I want to see be a little sharper this week. How do you feel about having Drew Aller on the field with Bo Prabula? At least the way they did it in week 1, I always feel like you're like the appendix out there. If you're the non-running quarterback, you're not really providing a viable threat, which is the whole point of having 11 viable threats on the field. Do you think there's enough that he can do to provide that balance?
No. It doesn't make any sense. I've never understood when teams go Wildcat, NFL or college, where you keep the starting cornerback that's an unathletic guy on the field. It doesn't make sense. You're taking one player out of the play, essentially. Drew Aller is not out there blocking, nor do I think Coach Franklin or Coach Andy Kotonicki want Drew Aller to be blocking. So I don't know. I'd like to see him come off the field. Now, the question is that was answered earlier this week is that Bo Prabula also has 2 helmets, one having a microphone in it and one not. So there's only one player at a time now that's allowed to have a microphone in their helmet, and that is going to be Drew Aller on the field. Well, so when Bo comes in, he has to have a helmet that has no mic in it. Or if Drew Aller, comes out of the game like today where we're going to see just Bo on the field, I'm sure Bo has to then have the helmet in his mic. So he's got 2 helmets, and there's kind of a lot to figure out there for Bo and the staff.
I know that feeling right now. I know that feeling
T. Frank currently has two headsets, about 4 people going into his ears at the moment. So
you got to. I just got it all right now, so it's sitting on my head, so it actually functions. You've got to have those processes down. You got to be able to operate these things, and another reason why a game like this is important is just reps doing those things. This is just kind of an off-the-cuff thing, but Landon, football, is that an easy sport from a mental perspective?
Absolutely not. It is.
That's what I want to focus on here. Is just like how do you get guys on the same page? What is the best way, or what's the most direct path to making sure your offense or your defense is working cohesively in the games that you want it to? Because you guys practice in the spring, there's now summer OTAs, you have fall camp, and it just seems like, is that enough time? And we always have the conversation of the first 4 games of the season, you're kind of getting into a rhythm. So what is falling into place in games like this?
Listen, there's more than enough time. College football, you spend too much time going over plays and meeting with your coaches. And so really what it comes down to is you have to perform in the game to get that confidence. Drew Aller has to perform the Bo Pabula has to perform. All these guys have to perform in game to grow that confidence. Because if it doesn't matter how many reps you take in practice and how many walkthroughs you do, if you are not seeing that from yourself in game, and when you turn on that tape after you played in that game, that confidence, it just starts to drop. That's how it naturally is as athletes. So I think coming into this game, this is where, I mean, last week was obviously a huge confidence builder, especially for that offense and Drew Aller specifically. But now you build a little more confidence, like I said, in that run game, in Katron Allen, who only had 10 rushes for 20 yards last week.
Yeah.
There's definitely some areas in that wide receiver too. Start to build the confidence there, find that guy. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity that presents itself today for guys on this Penn State roster to prove it not only to the fans, but to themselves heading into these bigger weeks that they can step up to the plate.
So this is the thing that I agree with RS. He says, T. Frank or Landon, do you think we see Ethan Grunkmeyer today? I really want to see him. But at the same time, I get Bo getting playing time. I want to see Ethan Grunkmeyer. I'm very high on his potential coming out of high school. I thought he was at the same level, even though he was not a 5-star. He's a top 10 quarterback nationally. I'm not saying anything that's a hot take here. I think he has a talent level on the same par as Drew Aller from a lot of perspectives. So do you think we get to see him today? And if we do, what do you want to see?
I think we'll see him for a lot of the fourth quarter. And what I would like to see from Coach Franklin and Kotonicki is let him pass the ball. I'd love to see like at least 5 to 6 passes from Ethan Grunkmeyer. And Grunkmeyer has the same quarterback trainer as Drew Aller. His name's Brad Mendler, and he's very active on Twitter. If you saw the Drew Aller
friend of the show.
Yeah, definitely. I've talked to him all the time. Brad Mendler, great guy. And he has kind of said that he thinks that Ethan Grunkmeyer, as you said, could be just as talented, if not more, than Drew Aller. And if you go and look, there's some videos where Trace McSorley, Ethan Grunkmeyer, and Drew Aller were all throwing together in Haluba Hall because they were training with Brad Mendler. And you watch how the ball jumps out of their hands.
Yep.
And it was like, Ethan Grunkmeyer has the most explosive ball. Yep. It just flies out more so than an NFL quarterback in Trace McSorley or someone like Drew Aller. So I think I'm excited to see him play. Now, can that translate onto the field? There is that question of that, always the mental aspect of it, making sure a quarterback can handle it, because that's probably bigger than anything else, is making sure that mental is where it needs to be, because you are leading a whole group of men onto the field. So it should be fun to see. But like I said, I would love to see 5 to 6 passes at least from Ethan Grunkmeyer in this game. And I think we'll see him late third quarter into fourth quarter.
That's one of those situations when we talk about arm talent, it's a word that means nothing, and also everything that involves throwing a football, because they can be different. The power that Drew Aller has and the way it jumps off his hand from a power standpoint, maybe Ethan doesn't have the air yards behind it from a pure how far can you throw the football. But you talk about release, velocity on the football, tight spirals, his footwork, his delivery, his mechanics are all clean. They're repeatable. And he has that ability to, I think, the same ability to see the play that Drew Aller has. So those are things I'm looking for. I want to see all that confirmed. I want to be right, so I want to see all those things from Ethan Grunkmeyer. Coming back, we're going to talk about Bowling Green. I'm almost afraid to say the name Bowling Green because I was like, no, don't go away. We're talking about the game today. So that's coming up. Keys to victory, our predictions, all that on the next side here on the Penn State Football Tailgate Show, powered by the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel and Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships.
It's more than just football at Penn State.
I have not caught up with those guys. They're not big talkers as it is, and when you got high school football going on and obviously class.
It's more than just football at Penn State. Here's This Week in Penn State Sports, brought to you by Bobby Rahal Lexus in Lewistown. Get ready to experience luxury like never before at Bobby Rahal Lexus of Lewistown. We are Nittany Valley's award-winning Lexus dealership at 425 Electric Avenue. Visit us on the web at Bobby.
perform.
I have not caught up with those guys. They're not big talkers as it is, and when you got high school football going on, and obviously classes back in session, we'll get in touch with them. Then I'm not going to blow them up when I already kind of have a good feel for why they switched anyway, right? With Matthew Otten, though, I think that's in some ways I think that's actually even bigger than Malachi. And I don't know if Sean will agree with that or not, but this was a guy that we talked about for a long time who some and Lash kind of had him as their top guy on the receiver board. Now it depends on who you ask, right? I mean, I think the easy way or the best way to answer that, though, is he's absolutely one of their top 5 or so targets for receivers. So to be able to flip him from Virginia Tech, I think was very important for Penn State, because he was a guy that I know they were kind of bummed out about to not get him the first time around. But versatile playmaker, man, runs has a sub 11 100, so solid speed and just does a little bit of everything, right? And when you're talking about an offense that's run now by Andy Koldenecki, it fits really well. And that's kind of was Charles Power's big takeaway when we caught up with him yesterday about Otten. So big addition there. And then obviously big in a lot of ways, adding Malachi Goodman to the class as well for so many different reasons. We talked about the schools they were going against with Auburn and USC and NIL implications and all that. And sure enough, Penn State gets it over the line, which really important for Troutwine. He already had a really good offensive tackle in Owen Alessini. I think now he has another one that's pretty versatile, right? I mean, I think he's going to be a tackle, but I mean, Malachi could play a couple positions, really. They could bump him inside if they absolutely had to. But really good balance, good base, very strong at the point of the attack. I mean, I think those are the kind of things that stand out about Goodman. And look, he's now the top-ranked player in this class for a reason. If you look across all the sites, everybody's very high on Goodman and his potential. So great addition for Troutwine and Penn State.
Before we get into the next phase of the show, Ryan, there was one other thing that I know happened this week that is kind of a bummer for Penn State fans. So I know there's not any further details, but for anyone that missed it, can you update the fans on Penn State's other offensive tackle commit from August, Kevin Brown?
Yeah, just sounds like he broke his foot. He was out last week against McDevitt. Not good, especially when it happens in practice. Not that practice or game matters, right?
That's all we need to cover.
Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships, celebrating more than 40 years of service to the community. Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships has a vehicle to fit your budget and transportation needs. Home of the $1,000 lowest price guarantee with 20 locations throughout Pennsylvania. This is the Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships Penn State Football Tailgate Show 2024, powered by the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel and a partridge in a pear tree. This is the longest name in the world. We're here coming to the end of an awesome show. Landon, these things always go so fast. We're going to get into our keys to the game here, and then we'll come back with our predictions in the final segment. But Penn State Bowling Green, I know you watched them. I watched them this week. That's our job, to make sure we know how Penn State's going to beat Bowling Green. So what is your initial salvo of, if you were game planning, what would you be doing here?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like you said, you come into these games and of course you expect to win, but there's things that you want to establish. And you look at the week one and some things that were good, but you want to improve upon. And I've talked about it the whole show, the run game. That is something you want to hammer away at, let Katron Allen get going, because as much as those are awesome for Nick Singleton to be back, I mean, he's back to that 2022 form where he's breaking off long runs. I want that Katron Allen from last year as well, where he's gashing 10, 15-yard runs and just putting his shoulder into someone. So you're getting back into the run game, and then talking about also continuing to build that confidence with Drew Aller and not only Trey Wallace, but a couple other guys, getting Caden Saunders back. He was a little bruised up, and he's only was the punt returner last week. Now he is back at wide receiver. We're going to see some of him. Julian Fleming, of course, was the big question mark last week. Why did he not play? Most of the fans said he did play. He was in there for just as many snaps as Trey Wallace, but just was not targeting by Drew Aller. So I think there'll be a little bit of an emphasis there for Drew Aller to spread the ball around in a game like this. And then it's just for the defense. Continue being dominant. Continue seeing what you saw from Jalen Reed, from KJ Winston, being probably the best defense in the country. But I would like to see them get a couple more sacks. I mean, this is where I want like a 5-6 sack day. Right. Let's get Abdul Carter that first sack.
A couple more 3-and-outs.
A couple more 3-and-outs and that confidence. And we talked about what filling the stat sheet does. You know, as much as you want to say it doesn't matter, it does to a defense and to these guys. When you look at that, you feel pride, and it gives you that confidence that you start to build. If you have a 2-sack day from Abdul Carter. So that is something I want to see for the defense, is putting pressure on Bowling Green's offense, and like I said, getting off the field a little bit quicker.
way Bowling Green plays defense, at least against Fordham, and I don't know, going back historically how they play necessarily, but if they played the defense they played last week just from the style, Penn State can throw for 450 yards in this game. They play a type of defense that is a kind of man-zone hybrid. It's called match quarters, where they're playing 4 deep players, but they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, keep guys in the run game, play over the top, but also play some man coverage. If you're going to play man coverage and suddenly Trey Wallace is in the slot against a max safety and he runs a post, that's a touchdown. Plain and simple. Like Tyler Warren could go for 150 yards in this game as well. I think the middle of this defense is vulnerable, and if they play that style of defense, the other option is Nick Singleton could have a 200-yard day as well, because when you're trying to spread the field out and then attack with the run game, the advantage, Landon, of having all those guys up front is that you can take advantage of a light box where there isn't an extra safety or a third linebacker, and suddenly there's just options abounding here, not just from a talent disparity perspective, but also from what Andy Kotelnicki and his offense, the way they attack, how they attack. I think that they can schematically have whatever they want today, and that's going to be what I'm curious. What threats are they going to establish early in the game? I think Tyler Warren's a big one today.
Yeah, I like that prediction. I just think there's going to be a lot of shots taken. That's why I want to see. Why don't we just chuck it up? Corey Geiger, baby. Shout out Corey Geiger, friend of the show. So I know, but really, I want to see him. I want to see Drew Aller and even Bo Prabula, I'd like to see take some shots down the field against a defense, like you said, turns into man a lot of the time. When you have one-on-one with Trey Wallace, with Tyler Warren, those guys, you take those 50-50 shots and let them make a play for you.
So I know also that the Bowling Green offense and their running game got a lot of love last week because of the way they were able to run the football. Impressive. The number of schemes, though, that they run, Landon, the number of things they do, there is a large diet if you're trying to ingest this from the Bowling Green perspective, and a lot of pulling offensive linemen from a defensive perspective. What sort of challenges are you presenting to the defense when you're trying to pull linemen out into the field, or you're trying to get guys running laterally? What are the challenges, and where can Penn State shine in that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things I noticed from the Bowling Green offense is they look creative and they look explosive. They had 305 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns on the ground, highlighted by Terry and Stewart, had about over 100 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns. So they clearly have a good back there. But I think where we shine in that is where they're trying to get outside a lot. So like you said, they pull their offensive linemen. They run a lot of pinning pull, meaning that someone blocks down and then a couple linemen pull out around.
Love it.
And they're also doing jet sweeps. We saw a shovel pass by them. I mean, they get very creative. But where we match up is that we have speed. We have Abdul Carter, Tony Rojas, KJ Winston, Jalen Reed, and that is going to allow us to make up for that.
So we're going to see all of that stuff play out, and we're going to give our predictions. We'll talk a little bit more about the game coming up today and what we think is going to happen on the other side. This is the Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships Penn State Football Tailgate Show 2024. We will be right back.
One card.
I'll follow up at the end.
I don't even know what my score
All
is.
right,
I think
don't
it was
worry.
48 to 10.
The article's out.
Thanks, bud.
Yep. Yeah, the article is out right now. You can read all from everybody. But Ryan, 48 to 10. What do you think?
Bowling Green is a better team than Kent State. Let's definitely start with that. I just think, okay, they ran it up quick on Fordham last week, but they played their starters through the majority of this game. And Fordham still had 400 yards in that game, 185 yards passing. I think you see a heavy run game. You try and get Katron Allen some momentum. Nick Singleton's already feeling good. Get Cam Wallace in there. Get Quentin, Corey, whatever it may be. I just also think you don't have much of a reason to show new concepts, give Big Ten teams a reason to scout you. I think you just build off your momentum from last week, keep that rolling really for these next couple of weeks. Maybe when you get to Illinois, UCLA, you start opening things up a little bit differently. But here we go. Cam Wallace has 23 career. Yeah. I think Cam Wallace will play a ton this upcoming weekend. But to me, it's really build on the run game. Don't show a whole lot because you shouldn't have to. Bowling Green's offense certainly can do some things. I don't think they're going to do a whole lot against a defense as fast and physical as Penn State's. But their defense also gave Fordham plenty of room to make some plays. And I think that's why this will end up being, something that does probably cover the spread. I had 48 to 10. I think once we get to the fourth quarter, you'll see quite a few backups in.
Fitz, what do you got?
I had 49 to 10. So Ryan was, I'm Price is writing Ryan here. Okay. I think that Penn State should be in control. Like I said, it's an older Bowling Green team. So they've got some experience. Maybe that lengthens the game a little bit. You're not facing anything overwhelming in terms of quarterback play, but this guy has been around for a long time. So it's a situation where I think that maybe that strings it a little bit longer than it needs to go. But Penn State's defense is, I think, too fast for this. I think Penn State's defense has the ability to take things away vertically, horizontally, every which way. So I think that's the difference. And then you get some punts, maybe get to work some of that punt return, maybe get to work some of the other stuff. But 49-10 is what I have for Penn State. I didn't even look at the I didn't really look at the spread and over under, but I saw it at one point. It was like 48 was the over under, and we each have Penn State, I think, scoring more than that. So I think that's interesting, and I don't think Bowling Green will score much. I'm terrified to predict a shutout in any game, because you look at Northwestern last year when they fumbled the opening kickoff, and then all of a sudden Northwestern kicks a field goal right away. That's why you stay away from that.
Yeah,
so
48.5 right now, by the way, is the over under. Go ahead.
I have 51-10, and I don't know how I arrived at that. Full disclosure, I haven't watched a single second of Bowling Green yet. That's on my to-do list for today. 51-10 because Penn State and points. But really what I came with away from our analysis is that we're all...
It's time to lock it up.
You better lock it up. No, you lock it up. You lock it up.
Here's the expert predictions for today's game.
All right, you're up.
Here we go. We are in the final segment. It's prediction time for the Penn State Football Tailgate Show. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, you probably just saw my prediction for the game. So, Landon, what is your prediction for Penn State football's final score today against Bowling Green?
I'll go Penn State 56, Bowling Green 13. I think it's going to be a really big day for Kaytron Allen. I think we're going to get him going again. I could see a 100-yard day for him. And fun fact, Kaytron Allen, when he rushes for over 80 yards, Penn State is 9-0. Let's get Kaytron Allen going today. 56-13, Penn State takes it.
So one of the things I want to follow up from last segment is last week I thought the Penn State linebackers, aside from Tony Rojas, kind of struggled. They were missed tackles. There were some blown assignments from veterans too. I want to see Kobe King play better. I want to see that get a little sharper. That's an area where it starts slow, it seems, over the last couple of years, where either Kobe or the defense in general they don't ever fall below the threshold of they can't win a game necessarily, but they get way better as the season goes on. They get more comfortable in the defensive scheme. So I just want to see that progress for them this week. I had 51-10. I finally got a chance to watch Bowling Green and some of the things that I was talking about in the previous segment. I would put it in the 60s at this point. I'm going to stick with 51-10, but I could see Penn State putting up 60 points in this game, especially if the defense gets some of those turnovers and they cause some havoc plays on that side. You can't give Andy Kotelnicki that much time and that much room in a defense. They ain't going to come out with a completely different plan, or else they're going to get blowtorched by this offense. So any final thoughts as we get out of here, heading into... Here's one thing that you and I haven't talked about, Landon. An entirely new Beaver Stadium experience for a lot of Penn State fans. I know that they're still working on it, and there's a lot of stuff that's going to change over the next couple of years, but immediately there is a different vibe inside. So you're going to be going in. You got to give us a report next week or the week after on what you saw different, how it was for you. How have you've been in the press box before?
I have.
Okay, all right. So this is not your first time.
We did the spring game together.
That's right. That's right.
I'm curious to see, these how it's going to work. I'm curious. The Wi-Fi concourse apparently has improved. I don't believe it. I don't think you'll still be able to send a text. So good luck, Penn State fans, trying to work your cell phones even during this game.
Yeah, so that's let us know in the comments section here on the BWL postgame show what your experience was if you do go to the game, watch the show, and give us some feedback on what it is like in the brand new Beaver Stadium, or brand-ish new Beaver Stadium, as they pause work on the construction so that Penn State can have all of these home games. It's been fascinating to watch all of that happen here in State College as we come here for the stadium and all that stuff, as we come to press conferences and things, the progress they've made already and all the things they have left to do.
Absolutely. You mind if I give a quick plug to you, Frank?
Go for it.
All right, I got guys. Follow me on Behind the Wall with Landon Tengwall on YouTube, Landon Tengwall on Twitter and Instagram. I got some cool stuff coming out this coming bye week. I got a sit down with Devon J. Thomas, formerly Devon Elise. I got a Beaver Stadium walkthrough coming out with Spider Caldwell, who was the equipment manager for about 30 years here with Joe Paterno. Got a couple other things coming, so be on the lookout for my YouTube this week. Got some cool stuff to get you through this coming bye week.
Oh, this has never happened to me before. We wrapped up the show like 2 minutes early. So any final thoughts here?
I got it.
I want to get into, I guess, one more thing about this game when it comes to the availability We just got that word as we get closer to the game. Some surprises here. Andrew Rapelier is out for the game. That's the major one here among the players that we already knew about in terms of Jackson Smolik. Tamir Robinson was not at practice. We were not expecting to see him, but he is also out. But Andrew Rapelier is a surprise for us. Wednesday at practice, he was the number 2 tight end through the line. Khalil Dinkins, I would say, would be questionable coming into this game. Just in general, from a participation standpoint, even if he suits up, even if he goes on the field, what sort of participation is he giving at this point? So that tight end room, we're going to see that stress today. What can that have an effect on the offense? How can that have an effect on the offense?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're down a couple tight ends. I mean, you're going to see Luke Reynolds. I mean, that's the answer. I think we're going to see a ton of Luke Reynolds today.
Wow.
That'll be exciting, especially if Tyler Warren takes a seat by halftime, third quarter. Luke Reynolds is going to be the main tight end today. Enter in 5-star young tight end. Let's see what he can do.
That's fascinating to the situation that we had last year where Andrew Rapelier saw 4 games and
10 seconds.
They were
10
saying
seconds.
we're going to get him on the field when we can, but we if they didn't have those players, he would have played last year, and suddenly now Luke Reynolds is thrust into the lineup in a more meaningful way here to start
Football
the game.
Tailgate Show, driven by Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships. The Tailgate Show is a production of Seven Mountains Media and BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Stay tuned for the call of the game from Steve Jones and Jack Ham, exclusively on 99.5